I feel like if we started every morning with drumming like that, we would all be much more productive in our jobs. That was amazing. It is such an honor to be with this community. You know, this is the best community of makers in technology. Just a group of builders and creators that have come together, and it's just such a special time to be in this business, working and learning with each other right now. And I would say there is not a better place to do that, in my mind, than here in Denmark, actually, which is the birthplace of possibly the most influential platform for builders and makers on the planet. I'm not talking about software. I'm talking about that platform. Right? Who's had an influential experience? Yeah, exactly. These guys also made a movie. Anybody see this movie? So let me tell you about this movie. I'm going to digress. I promise we'll talk about technology and do demos, but let me go on a tangent for a minute. I watched this movie with my kids a couple years ago, and it has become one of my favorite films. But the central character, the bad guy in this movie, is somebody that presents as a well-intended businessman, but actually is an evil villain trying to turn everyone into an automaton robot and a sea of corporate sameness, right? And on the other side, you have the master builders, right? Who have basically unlimited power to create anything they can imagine instantly. But the real hero is an ordinary worker, right? An ordinary worker who helps those master builders get over their individualism and elitism and work together to save the world and make that world a better place. I don't know how that's possibly relevant to this moment in technology. But no, we're kind of living in that moment, right? We're living between this pole of, just pure automation for the sake of automating things, and yet also living at a moment where we have unprecedented ability to be creative, to create things that previously were never practical or possible, right? And we, as a community, we sit right in the middle of that. Right? We get to decide what kind of future we want to live in. We get to decide and shape how our organizations react to this moment, right? And we're not just living in a story, and we're not just made of plastic, right? We are a community of humans and people with passion and drive to make our organizations better, right? To create things that never could have existed before, right? And that is the community that Microsoft exists to serve and has always existed to serve, right? From the earliest days of VBA and Excel macros and Access, right? Microsoft has always deeply appreciated this role of the maker, right? The person that sits between a pure software engineer and an end user, but really spans that entire gamut of what it means to create, what it means to improve, and what it means to make work better. And this is a golden age for makers, right? This is a time for us to really throw off a lot of the constraints of the past and build entirely new things. And that's why it's so cool to be part of this community. I thought I'd open with some of the makers that are really pushing
I'm a builder of things make work suck less.
We honestly didn't have one problem. We had almost many small pockets of different areas.
We have so much data, and it is, if we don't have the right process, I feel like we would just be spending hours and hours to find that information that we're looking for. The first initiative that I started with was developing an agent within Copilot Studio, was called a correspondence agent.
Well, I think one of my proudest work is not actually one solution per se, but the whole framework that we created with Power Platform to drive the digital acceleration of the departments that we have in our company.
With AI in the mix, we can actually automate much more than what we used to.
The team is now supported with structured, consistent output, which means less time on process and more time focusing on meaningful work.
People don't just wait for IT to build for them, and they want to take the lead and learn and build themselves.
If you can make someone's work or task that slightly bit easier, it gives you that huge satisfaction that you've done something good.
I think it's a bit of a mindset and culture shift, if I'm honest.
I think it really comes down to just basically having a very low tolerance for inefficiency.
I think the Power Platform community in itself has played a huge part, both in my career and probably personal growth.
Honestly, it feels like a giant group of friends who are basically all happen to be obsessed with solving problems.
One of the biggest things I've learned is that sometimes we look for huge problems to solve, but the biggest impact comes from something very small.
So like I said, it is a beautiful time to be making things. But the question is, so what are we going to make? Right? And as a technology community that sits right in between all of these axes of business and software and AI, it's a really important time to step back and say, what are we focused on? Right? And I would say there's three big things from a Microsoft perspective that we are focused on. And what we'll spend time over the course of this morning zooming into is each of these three things. The first one is just make every individual, every person, help them achieve more. That's core to our mission. But very practically, help their daily lives be a lot more effective over their existing systems. Right? But that alone is not enough. We also want to start to improve those systems themselves. Right? How do we start to add and improve and accelerate all of the ways that we work today? And then how do we go further than that? Right? How do we start to imagine and create and advance things that we never could have done before? Right? Question the systems themselves and start to reinvent them. And these are not mutually exclusive, right? We have to go think about how to do all of these things and do them in parallel in order to create a better organization, a better way of working. And so we'll zoom into each of them. We'll talk about some of the latest technology. We'll look at examples of what customers are doing in these categories today. We'll look at some awesome demos, then we'll come back and put it back all together. But I want to start with the individual, right? Start with the daily life of everybody who works inside of our organizations. And, obviously the big bet Microsoft is making to help every individual be more productive is called Copilot. You may have heard of it. We've talked about it once or twice, right? But Copilot has expanded dramatically within the last just few months, just this calendar year, right? From being, purely a chat experience and a question and answer experience, that's very powerful, but now adding all these new capabilities to work with you, to actually go create things and take on tasks, to be able to behind the scenes write code as part of doing those tasks, and even now to be able to do work much more autonomously than it ever could before with autopilots like the new Scout that has just been released. And so this world of Copilot is expanding dramatically for every individual worker. And the one I want to zoom in on, first today is Cowork. This is something that has really changed the way a lot of people work in a very short amount of time, and really sort of moved past that first era of AI interaction of question and answer and short, ephemeral chats to be much deeper and more effective at accomplishing work and tasks. But seeing is always believing, right? And so rather than just tell you about this, we'd love to show you. To do that, Dara, I'd love you to come up here and impress these people with how you work with Cowork. Give it up for Dara.
Good morning, Copenhagen. Come on, good morning, Copenhagen. Yeah, let's do it. Look around this room. Every one of you is here because you care. You care about the work. You care about the products. You care about your customers, the people you build for. And with all of the work you do, you still show up for this community. So today, I'm not here to help you move faster. No, I'm here to introduce to you a tool, a coworker that lives in your tools and finishes the work that you were unable to get to. This is Copilot Cowork, and it's how makers like you get things done. Let's do it. So here's my Wednesday in Cowork. I'm going to fire off the first task while I explain. So I have two things to do today. I have a Q2 solution review from my customer called Contoso, and I also run a Java user group on the side. I fired off the first task, and let's take a look at what I've asked Cowork to do. I'm asking it to pull together a Q2 solution review, and then to build me a rich word recap and an interactive HTML scorecard with KPI tiles. Now I want to show you something interesting that I've done here. I have enabled the brand new Dynamics 365 sales and customer service plugins right here. Now why did I do this? Well, WorkIQ is already enabled in Cowork, but Contoso's business data lives in Dataverse. So I need these plugins to pull in that data and to get to work. And there are a plethora of other plugins that I have available here. I have things like Box and Canva. I have things like Monday.com down here. So Cowork can now connect to these apps where you do business and pull in data to get to work. Furthermore, I also have skills. There are some pre-built skills such as the Outreach Composer or the Business Case Composer. But I've also built my own skills, the Newsletter Builder and the Sound Like Me skill, so that Cowork can work just like me. So you can build new skills. You can actually also upload your skills into Cowork. So using plugins and skills, Cowork can work in the systems that you do and do the work the way you do it. We see here that Cowork didn't just start with building. It started with a plan. The first thing it's going to do is to get data from Dynamics. Then it's also going to pull customer service cases from Dynamics as well. It's going to pull in the documents from SharePoint using WorkIQ, and it's going to finish the rest of the plan. But why is this important? Well, because no one hired me for my ability to download CSVs. No, they hired me for what comes after, the judgment, the synthesis, all the work, the judgment. Cowork gives me back what I can do. Oh, I'm so sorry. Embarrassing. Yeah, Anders, what's up? I'm on stage. Your CFO is joining the call. What does she need to see? Okay, I can handle it. I can handle it. Okay. Sorry, folks. That was Anders. He was my sponsor at Contoso. He said that his CFO is joining the Monday call, and she wants to see the revenue at risk. So I'm simply going to ask Cowork to do just that. But notice, I didn't stop the chat. I didn't start a brand new chat. I simply asked Cowork to do this midstream, and it's going to pick it up and execute the task flawlessly. All right, it's going to take a few minutes for Cowork to continue working on this. It's going to take a few minutes for Cowork to cook. Let us look at some other things. You can see here that I have so many tasks in Cowork working in parallel. You know, I don't have to babysit Cowork. It's just able to get to work on multiple different streams. And we can see down here the package for the user group recap is ready. So let's take a look at this. And we can see here, this is a task that I started behind the scenes, that Cowork has also executed flawlessly. It's built out a plan, and I want you to notice here, Cowork built 6 different outputs across 3 different apps. So Cowork doesn't just build you one document. It can take over and really work in the apps that you do. Excel, PowerPoint, Documents, Outlook, you name it, Cowork can do it. Right down here, we also see skills and plugins. I gave you an intro to this. Cowork has used the Word skill to build the documents, the PowerPoint skill to build the deck, the Excel skill to build the deliverables. Now, I showed you 2 skills when I started, the Newsletter Builder and the Sound Like Me skill. We're going to come back to talk about those in a little bit. But let's look at the recap that Cowork has generated for this user group session. And if you run a user group, you know how much work it takes. Multiple speakers, Q&A, multiple sessions. All that work is the kind of work that tends to fall behind when your customer comes calling. But not today. Cowork carries both. In the document, we see by the numbers, 42 people in the room, 7 questions asked, 17 chat messages, the top requested topic, well, you guessed it, agents. And as we scroll, we see a rich document that Cowork has built. We had 3 different talks, the first on building AI agents in Copilot Studio, ALM patterns, and we also see direct quotes from the session. How did Cowork get this? Well, using WorkIQ while the meeting was being transcribed. And as we scroll, Cowork doesn't just deal with text. it also builds rich visuals to help us understand what happened in the session, all the better. And we also have a deck here that Cowork has created. So it's used the exact same data to build this deck. We see the title slide, the night and 4 numbers, 3 takeaways, who took the stage, rich charts and rich graphs. Folks, give it up for Cowork. And like I said, I enabled the newsletter builder and the Sound Like Me skill. Well, I wanted Cowork to write just like I did. I didn't want any AI slop. So I enabled this skill so that Cowork would write this LinkedIn post just like me. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, this is actually pretty close to how I sound. The energy, the hashtags, all of that. And the best part, Cowork has now reached into my Outlook folder and drafted this email to the user group. And how do I know? Well, you can see down here that it says sent by Cowork. This draft is ready for review. Cowork starts by thanking the community, the quick recap, the biggest takeaways, and so much more. Now, it's also attached the PowerPoint deck that it created based on my instructions. And this looks pretty good, so I think it's good to go. I'm going to send it off. Now, are we ready for the task that you and I started? The Q2 solution review. Cowork is done. We can see that it went through the plan and executed. But I want to draw your attention to something right here. We see a new skill, the HTML skill. So Cowork doesn't just build documents, it can also write code. And if we see right here, it's built this rich visual. We can see the monthly active users from data that we pulled in from Dynamics, adoption rate, open cases. And it's also built this rich interactive scorecard. Now, this is something that functions like an app. Maybe not a real app, but more of a disposable one that would help me communicate more clearly on Monday morning. And we see down here, we see the ask that Anders asked for from the CFO. We see the case ID, the account, the theme, the priority, and we also see the revenue at risk for each of these cases. Now, Cowork didn't just build me a document, it built me this artifact that functions like an app. And this looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do now, I'm simply going to send it off to Anders to have a review, and I'm also going to CC Mitty on the review. Folks, there are a whole new class of applications and artifacts that we wouldn't necessarily build software for, but now we can with Cowork. 2 pieces of work landed. A community recap on its way to 40 people who trusted me with their Thursday evening. A revenue at risk review on its way to a CFO who's betting on me on Monday morning. The community side of your work, the customer side of your work. Cowork doesn't choose, it handles both. You came into this room with so much work. The weekend recap, the long nights, the projects you've always wanted to do but never had the time. That ends now. This is Copilot Cowork. And it's not the AI tool that helps you work. It's the AI tool that does the work. So let us get to work. Tusen tak, Copenhagen. Thank you, Copenhagen. Ryan, back to you.
I don't know what he's selling, but I'm buying 3. That was super exciting to see. It's been also very exciting to see Cowork evolve so quickly in a very short amount of time. A lot of what you just saw didn't exist, 6 weeks ago. None of what you just saw existed six months ago. And Cowork is really becoming this fully featured enterprise grade, and now, as of just days ago, generally available set of capabilities in the Microsoft cloud. And it goes, again, way beyond chat. Some of the other things that are there are the ability to select multiple models, right? To run Cowork over advanced reasoning models, whether from Anthropic or OpenAI, to be able to connect to any system through those plugins, to express skills and tools, to even use a web browser now as part of that Cowork and not just be limited to individual file operations. The list goes on, and we continue to really advance quickly in this space. But beyond the individual tech capabilities, it is really what Dara highlighted, right? It's the ability to get to all of those things that we don't often have time for in the day, to amplify the quality of them, to spend more time thinking about the what and the why than doing the manual work ourselves. And that is really catching fire in a lot of organizations. Just in the 3 months of the public preview of Cowork, more than half of Fortune 500 have started using this capability and using it extensively. It's changed a lot of how those of us who do interact with it on a regular basis work. And people are doing this not just for the productivity benefits. Right? If you zoom into some of these customers, they'll tell you that it's the productivity benefits matched with the fact that there is security, there's oversight, there is trust in the access to this information in the Microsoft cloud. This isn't just something running on a local machine for personal use. It's really managed and part of the broader fabric of what we do inside of an M365 environment. And that is providing trust for even highly regulated financial institutions like the Capital Group here to really be able to accelerate and extend what individuals can do. Right, so Copilot with tools like Cowork, amazing at making people more productive over their existing systems. Right, but that does not necessarily change the systems themselves. Right, and so the next layer to get into here is how do we go to that next level of really starting to evolve how we operate. Right, not just connect to a CRM system or connect to an underlying database, but start to rethink those fundamental operations at their basic level. Right? And this is something where there is so much opportunity to improve how all of our organizations work. Right? For all of the innovation we've seen over the last 2 decades in software as a service, in B2B software, even in low code, there are still a lot of silos in all of our organizations. Right? A lot of these technologies, particularly our core business systems, whether it's CRM or ERP or SCM or any other acronym you can come up with, have really developed in a fragmented way. And often our companies run, dozens or hundreds or sometimes thousands of different systems that do not all naturally play nicely together. In fact, that's where a lot of those documents and emails and meetings and frankly a whole lot of data warehousing and data lakes and reporting come from, is trying to make sense of and move work between a customer sold, a good delivered, an invoice paid, that are locked in all of these systems that don't naturally integrate well with each other, right? And so a lot of this productivity work is not really separate from business systems and business applications. It exists because of the gaps between those applications, right? And this isn't news to people in this community, right? This is what we have all been doing with tools like Power Apps and Power Automate for years, right? It's starting to make the flow of work across these systems more effective, more automated, better user experiences, replacing manual processes and documents with applications and automation, right? But those were still often very point-based solutions, right? I could connect to that table or this process, and I could build it one at a time. By adding Copilot and agents into the mix, we start to really directly expand what Power Apps, what Power Automate, what core Power Platform solutions can do, right? Because Copilot and Cowork and everything that Work IQ brings to the forefront, doesn't just know that one document or that one table. It has access to a much wider range of information and the ability to reason over it, right? The understanding of what people in my company are doing and how it relates to that process, right? And we don't have to abandon anything we've built in Power Platform because these tools are coming directly into the platform and directly enhancing what we've already created and improving the skills we already have to do it, right? And so this is what's really exciting for a community like this. Everything we've invested, whether you're brand new to Power Platform or you've been working with it for years, is directly evolving and becoming more effective in this new world. And again, seeing is absolutely believing. So to show you the forefront of what Power Platform can do with Copilot and agents in the mix, I'd love to invite Matt up here on stage to show it to us live. Matt, come on up.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. And good morning, Copenhagen. So everyone and every company has apps like the ones you're about to see. Your company built them, people use them, and people depend on them. And today, we're going to celebrate those investments and build upon them, enabling some pretty powerful end-user scenarios without throwing anything away or rebuilding anything. So this is a time tracking app that may be familiar to many of you that work with billable hours. It was inspired by one of our Power Platform MVP. So we're seeing an app that has a deep project hierarchy, so I can see all of my clients, I can see which projects are on track and the status, I can drill in, and of course I have a robust timesheet to understand the billable hours across all of these projects. So without changing anything, what I am going to go to is the new App MCP pane on the left. And this App MCP is just kind of a fancy way of saying that we're going to deconstruct this app into a set of tools that Copilot can use to reach in and take actions on your behalf. Not just the data behind it, but the full user experience. It does this by deconstructing it into a set of built-in tools. When you turn this on, all the tables, all the views, all the forms, the grids, every user experience you're used to will automatically get exposed to Copilot to read, write, and manipulate data. But what about custom controls, like this pretty powerful looking timesheet control here? Well, I'm happy to tell you that this is supported too, and any custom tools you can expose to Copilot as well. So since I'm talking about custom controls, I want to take just a minute to look at the code here and actually celebrate something that was pretty impactful for me. So I actually did build this demo, and this is a real demo that we're going to open source, so anything you see here, you'll be able to go to GitHub and connect this up yourself. So anything you're inspired by, please take a look at that and see how we built it. But I built this, of course, with the help of GitHub Copilot. And so this is the TypeScript that is that timesheet control. Everything about it, it's about 800 lines of code. And what you're going to see are a couple new APIs that we added called xrm.copilot. On the right here, I've asked Copilot, hey, how is the new xrm.copilot API used? And it looks at the docs. This is all stuff you can use today. So you can see it fetch the Learn docs. It said, hey, this is a client API available for Power Apps that effectively lets my app or my control, my PCF control, communicate with Copilot back and forth. You'll see a couple APIs in here that we'll see in just a moment where I can send a prompt to Copilot. And there is an action handler that I can respond to in my app so that when Copilot has a response it wants to pass back, there's a two-way bidirectional communication going back and forth. Very powerful APIs that let me do some pretty powerful things. So when I'm ready to publish this app MCP, I come over here and I click the publish button. With that, it becomes available to Copilot. So let's take a look at this. Now I'm going to switch into my end user hat and see how this app behaves. The first thing you'll notice on my timesheet control is I've done away with the need to manually and tediously click through things. I can instead say log 2 hours of EPPC Keynote prep on Monday, Tuesday, and 3 on Wednesday. Copilot opened up automatically. Now, I chose to do this, to be clear. I chose to put a text box above my control. You don't have to do this, but I wanted to raise awareness of this feature and drive users to it. So that prompt automatically opened up Copilot and passed it to it. Now, Copilot's connecting back to my app, and within just a few minutes, you'll see that it extracted my natural language request into a set of fields. And so this is a relatively simple request where you can see that I am looking through EPPC Keynote prep. I did 2 hours a couple days and then 3 hours on Wednesday. This looks great. This is a rich interactive widget. I can now respond with completely custom UX, and I can save this now back to my timesheet. And so this experience here where you see these dotted line arrows is basically me staging the change so that, again, I built this into my control so that I can save these changes as I see. Complete bidirectional communication, and with these new APIs, you can make it so if a user can see something on your app, Copilot can take actions on it on their behalf. So, I spend a lot of time in Power Apps, but I also spend a lot of time in Outlook. And today is a particularly exciting day in my inbox because a new phase of a project I have been pitching for weeks got approved. A relatively happy moment gets a little soured when I have to manually put this into the CRM or the system that I track. What I was able to do within Outlook is open Copilot and say, create a new project from this email. This form pre-populated with the client, the project lead, the category, all the hours extracted, the description, the dates, all that tedium taken away from me. And of course, I get full lookup experience. This is the form that you're used to in your app brought to me in Outlook without context switching. Since we're here, I'll go ahead and investigate something that a colleague of mine had been mentioning, that some of our projects are at risk of going over budget. And so now I'm going to send that prompt, again, right from within Outlook. And what you'll see within just a few seconds is the same exact grid control. These are full user experiences. You are no longer limited to just Markdown or text or images. You can bring the full interactivity, business rules, validation, everything that your users depend on and are comfortable with, now brought to them in other M365 experiences. And here's that grid. I can see the budgeted hours remained. It took my natural language query. I can, of course, use the grid like I'm familiar with sorting, filtering. I can drill directly into one of these projects and see that full form experience. Pretty powerful stuff without leaving Outlook. So now I can draft some emails to the project leads, diagnose why these projects are over budget without having to context switch. Now I have one last thing to show you, and this is my favorite part of the demo, because this is a real scenario that I imagine a lot of you are familiar with if you track, again, these billable hours. So what I'm going to say to Copilot is reconcile my meetings with my timesheet and send that over. So this is a calendar that probably looks familiar to many of you. It's got a mix of free time, it's got a mix of one-on-ones, focus time, billable time, daily recurring stand-ups, different project work I might be working on. And it was pretty tedious in the past to manually move this stuff from my Outlook calendar into my timesheet app. It used to be locked in the calendar, locked in some way that I had to either custom implement. With this app exposed inside of Outlook, I don't have to do anything to connect these two things together. I can say reconcile my meetings with my timesheet. I get that same exact timesheet control that you saw in the app. It looks like it grabbed all the different projects. It grabbed the different times for each day, fully reconciled my calendar with my app, merging these two things together. I can, of course, discard, edit, or just confirm them and move on with my day. Pretty powerful coming together of these systems, not only at their low-level data, but the entire user experience. I'm really excited to see what you make with this. And with that, I'll hand it back to Ryan for the rest of the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. That was not your uncle's Power Apps. I mean, all respect to your uncle. But man, how far has this platform come in a very short amount of time? And I hope we want to digest a little bit of what you just saw, because it was a lot, right? We're bringing Copilot and AI just natively into every existing app experience. We are also taking the data and capabilities and skills that are already described and implied in those apps and making it available to Copilot and agents. And then bringing the experiences with it, right? So that users can use those apps anywhere they are, whether it's in a Copilot chat, whether it's in a sidecar of Outlook like Matt showed, or whether it's in a custom agent experience. At the same time, we're also giving coding agents tools to work with and create for this world, right? So that things that used to be locked in very elite and advanced scenarios around Power Platform are now democratized and easier to accomplish for a wider range of people, right? And what all of this amounts to is just pure value on top of everything that this community and our organizations have been invested in, right? It's the ability to take all of these amazing solutions that are already doing incredible work inside of our companies and take them to the next level, right? And take all the people that have been working around them to the next level along with them. And so, really exciting stuff happening in and around the core of Power Platform, and a great taste you just saw of it there with apps. But look, this is not just features, right? We're seeing a lot of great energy in the community and among customers taking advantage of those capabilities to really take their solutions to the next level. And one I want to highlight here is Cone. This is an amazing global company, to thousands of people around the world. They deal with a lot of physical stuff, elevators, escalators, etc. But they have an amazing Power Platform program, and they've built it up over years. I had a great chance to chat with some folks at the reception last night. We're talking 3,000 makers, and some of them professional developers enabled with Power Platform, working together with citizens in a fully managed program. More than 30,000 apps, Power Apps built inside of this organization, but now also able to bring AI directly into the flow of that work. One solution, and there's a public documentation about this you can read, brings together unstructured documents sitting in SharePoint, structured data in SAP, apps to view that much more easily, automation, but then also using AI very strategically in that flow to go process and understand more than 50,000 service contract documents every single month, right? And so just really incredible acceleration over those existing set of capabilities and working it into that existing Power Platform world. So look, all of this is great for making people more productive, for enhancing and evolving the solutions we've already created, but what about all the problems that we have never been able to solve before, right? What about all of that space that, even Power Platform, for all of its great capability, was maybe not the best tool for in the past, or the processes that we do not have to think of as traditional applications anymore and can start to reimagine and question in the beginning. And that is really where Copilot Studio is focused. Right, but I want to reintroduce Copilot Studio to this group, right? Because obviously it's been out there for a while, and we have tens of thousands of amazing things being done and built in Copilot Studio every single month. But we are also behind the scenes rapidly evolving Copilot Studio. Right, and we're doing this a little bit quietly, to be honest. In this audience, you'll be the first to see on a stage like this some of the brand new things that are coming to Copilot Studio. And we're working out loud. We're shipping these things into preview. You can use them today. How many people have seen this version of Copilot Studio in your user experience? Yeah. It looks nicer. It's a nicer UX. There's a great maker experience around it. But I want to talk about actually the most important things here are not at the pixel level. Right, the most important things here are actually happening under the hood and behind the scenes. Because the state of the art for building with AI and building agents has changed dramatically. Even from the time that we last got together at the European Power Platform Conference to now, we've seen a huge shift in how we think about the architecture of an agent and what it can do. Back then, maybe 6-7 months ago, the state of the art for an agent was we wrote a whole lot of prompting, and then we called, very specific models for very specific tasks. We almost used them like APIs, right? And things like orchestration and long-running processes are really hard to get exactly right. We mostly built chatbots with that type of a tool, right? But now we have not only more advanced models, we have more advanced ways to use them and work with them together, right? And we're now hosting models in their own container. Think of it like a virtual machine or computer that has the ability to run for a long time, has the ability to use tools within that container, has the ability to reason over challenges and deviations to a plan, to make a plan in the first place and execute it. And that is enabling far more complex and far more sophisticated agent work, right? And this kind of architecture on the right, that's how GitHub Copilot is built, that's how Cowork is built that you just saw Dara use earlier, that's how a lot of the modern coding agents are really driving a lot of value. It is now how the new Copilot Studio is built as well, right? And so beyond the nice looking pixels, there's a fundamental shift in the capability and sophistication of what agents can now do in Copilot Studio. There's another shift as well. You notice on that screenshot before, there were actually two things. There were agents, which sort of take that model and put it into a container, give it goals, give it outcomes, give it instructions and skills, and let the agent decide what tool to use when, what order to work in. But there are also workflows, right, which take the same set of tools, but actually lets the human decide the order of operations. Lets the person decide, I always want a process to happen exactly this way. And guess what? Those things are interoperable, right? I can use the same set of tools, and whether it is MCP servers or API connectors, or just core out-of-the-box tools, And I can have a workflow call an agent. I can have an agent use a workflow as a tool, right? And so these things really family together in a really powerful way. But I want to go beyond diagrams and actually show it to you live. And so for the first time that we'll do a demo like this in public, I can't think of a better person to show it off than Mitty. Mitty, please come on up here and show these people the new Copilot Studio. Yeah.
Every maker in this room has built some version of this. A document arrives. For me today, it's going to be a vendor bid. The document arrives, a flow extracts the data, routes it, maybe even sends a notification. And then it all stops. Because the next step is not automation, it's judgment. Someone or some agent needs to review this information, check it against our requirements, check it maybe against some compliance requirements as well, and get a decision, a yes or a no. Now, I also know that many of you have manually built this glue before, right? To bring automation and judgment together, to bring agents and flows together. So today, I'm excited to give you a sneak peek into how Copilot Studio is closing that gap all the way from a document arriving to a recommendation posted in a Teams channel. Let's get started. This is the new Copilot Studio. I'm going to build a bid evaluation agent today, so I'm going to drop in my prompt and go hit enter. What I'm asking Copilot Studio to build for me is an agent that can take the vendor bid, take in any attachments, review it, check it against our internal policies, and come up with a recommendation on what to do next. I see that Copilot Studio is going through its chain of thought and starting to build me this agent. In the interest of time, I'm going to show you what it built me. This right here is the new experience for building agents. It's super clean, it's super neat. I personally love building agents here. And so today, I'm not going to give you a whole detailed tour, but I'll point out two specific things. The very first is that I can continue to pick the model I want this agent to use based on the job I'm giving it. The second thing that I want to point out for you is that I can now add skills. So in here, you can see I've got this requirement coverage skill, I've got an evidence verification skill, and let me show you what they look like when I click into them. It's got a description, it's got instructions, but basically skills are reusable packaged capabilities that tell my agents how to use the tools that are configured for it. Now, my rule of thumb here is, if I ever find myself writing the same paragraph of instructions over and over again across my agents, that right there is a skill trying to get out. So now that I have this agent built, the next step for me is to test it. I'm going to use this real bid email that's in my inbox. It's got a bunch of information here, and it has a lot of information in its attached PDF. And so I come back in here, and I go to the Preview tab, provide all of that, the attachment, the email body, and test my agent. It went through its chain of thought, it went through the skills I provided it, it went back through all the information I've given it, and it identified that actually I should probably go ahead and reject this bid. This is what I expected based on the content, and so I feel good. You know, we built the agent, we tested it out, and in the past, this would have been it, right? Next step, deploy to prod. No, that's no longer the case. My job as a maker has changed. The real breakthrough for me is not just in authoring agents anymore, it's in continually improving them. The way I do that is by coming over here into the Evaluate tab, where you'll see I have a range of eval sets that I've been running on my agents. What are evals? Evals are basically complex scenarios that your agents might run into in the wild. And so I'm going to give you a real example. Let's dig into this last eval set I ran. Most of these evals passed, except for these last two. Let's take a look at this one. In here, we're seeing that the request was to give, a score based on the information I'm providing to the agent. Let's see why the agent failed. It says that scoring requires a scheme, a marking scheme, a scoring scheme. And of course, the agent failed, because I have not provided this information to it. This is a very fixable problem. I know exactly what I need to do. I can go back into the agent, update the information I'm giving it so that I can actually compute these scores. But the important thing here is I didn't just hit failure. I was able to go through the agent's chain of thought and identify exactly what the agent needed so that it can perform better in production. And that right there is my pro tip for you today. Whenever your agent fails in prod, come back in here, come back to the Evaluate tab, and add it as an eval. These evals are the compounding asset for your organization. Now that we have the eval, so we've built our agent, we've tested it out, we've evaled it. Next, we now deploy to prod, and after that, I can come back in here into the Monitor tab and see every run this agent has taken, every tool it's used, every knowledge source it's used in its production operations. There we go. We just built our first agent together in the new Copilot Studio, the bid evaluation agent. But I'm not done. I'll take the claps. Thank you. But this is only half of the demo, right? Let's take a step back and think about the bid evaluation process. This agent that we just built assumed that the document is just available for it to go through. It assumed that the recommendation it produces is usable. It is not. As all of us here know, I have to deal with some way of getting the vendor's information and the bid information over into the agent. I have to deal with the recommended output, get it to my team so they can actually action it. This is where the new workflows comes in. This right here is the experience for building workflows, and I want to hear you clap if you've seen this before. Let's go. Okay, so if you've seen this before, you know you're in for a treat for the next few minutes. This right here is a workflow that I built, and I'm going to walk you through. I know it looks like a lot, so don't worry. We'll go through this together. Before I get started, I want to show you this is the bid evaluation agent that we just created. It's got a beautiful little sticky note on there for you to remind yourselves what exactly we just built 2 minutes ago. But in here, the other piece that I really love is if you are from Power Automate land and you love your top-down view, I love toggling between these layouts so that it's just what I'm familiar with. But here, let's go through the workflow, and let me walk you through every single step in here. Now, this workflow gets triggered when a new email arrives. When the email arrives, I go ahead and use AI to classify that email. I want to know if that email is talking about a request for proposal, a claim, contract, or something else. And based on that, I will take different actions accordingly. Today, we don't have enough time to go through all 4 branches, so I'm going to walk through the RFP one. In this classify step, though, before I continue, I'm using AI to do this classification. I want to make sure it works as expected. I can come in and test this one single step. Let's go through that. In here, I am going to paste the contents of that email that we just went through. And in the top right, I hit test. And so it's going to go do its running. But as I was telling you earlier, my job as a maker has changed, right? I set conditions here. And now I'm checking if I'm getting the right outcomes. And it looks like it did indeed correctly predict that that vendor bid is an RFP scenario. That's awesome. And before we proceed, since we're on the topic of evals, Ryan, I hope you don't mind me sharing this secret with our audience today. But basically, whenever you come into Copilot Studio and whenever you hit, this is how you know it's a live demo, the feedback button, and you share feedback with us about things not working in the product, we, behind the scenes, are going and creating evals for it and going and improving Copilot Studio. So please keep your feedback coming, and this is also how we know that evals are a game changer when you're building product. Okay, enough about that. Let's go on. We've done our classification. Assuming it's an RFP, we then go ahead and fetch the attachments from that email. We get the email. We run it through bid evaluation agent, which we just walked through building together. Based on its output, if it determines that human review is needed, we go ahead and loop in a teammate. After that, we go ahead and invoke the researcher agent. I've inline embedded this Microsoft 365 agent. I've given it its prompt in here. But basically what this agent's going to do is it's going to take the information from this bid evaluation agent and go check about the vendor. Go do some more due diligence to make sure that our decision is rooted in a bit more info and we've verified the claims. After researcher is done, we take all of this information from the first two agents, pass it to the final recommendation agent, which takes all of this, pulls it together into a usable form for my team, and posts it to a Teams channel. Let's see this in action. So I'm going to go to an activity run here. I do not have 15 minutes to show you the entire run, but as you can see, we have exactly how much time each step took. I can see how it executed. It was indeed an RFP workflow, and it posted something to Teams. This is what that looks like. This is the recommendation from that workflow. That was a lot of steps, so let me recap for you real quick. In this workflow, we used one AI step to classify the email that came in. We used 3 agents. We used the bid evaluation agent, the researcher agent, and the final recommendation agent to do the thinking. And at the end of that, we have something that's very actionable for my team to go take its next steps on. And so every deterministic step in this process did its work. We had 3 agents, 1 AI step come together to do that thinking, and it all held together without any blood, sweat, or tears because I used the new Copilot Studio. Back to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Miti. That was awesome. There was a lot going on there in the new Copilot Studio, so I want to unpack a little bit and highlight a few of the things that we just saw. Workflows are incredibly powerful, not just for traditional automation, but for the ability to orchestrate how agents work together, right? To be able to use an agent exactly when it's needed with exactly what you want it to do and pass off those AI-generated capabilities into the rest of a predictable workflow. Not only is that more predictable and controllable, it's also more credit efficient, right, as we go build those things. Now, as we want the agents to be effective at what they do, we have a lot of control that is not just writing things down in instructions, right? We can start to think about tools and skills and how we instruct that agent to do very specific tasks. As we do that, we can start to really get control and choice over what models we use for each of those tasks, right? You notice that I have a control here where I can select and test and evaluate multiple different orchestration models for my agent. I can also use different models for specific skills or specific steps in a workflow, so I can get the right mix of incredibly capable reasoning over hard problems and incredibly efficient and fast response over very specific things. Right? And so I can start to really use these tools to stitch it together. How do I know it's good? I write evals, right? And this is so important to AI quality and makers going forward. It's not just the first time I draft an agent or a workflow, it's then the rubric I use to grade it and decide how good it is, and then use that to shape how I climb the hill of quality. And every time I get near the top, that means I've got to raise the bar, right? And start to add harder and harder test cases into my evals and keep that quality climbing, right? And that really is the new system of making in an AI world. We do a little bit up front, but then we do a lot once we get things out into the world and sort of water flowing through those pipes to constantly improve. And whether improve means, tune our models, or improve means add new skills, or improve means work with workflows and agents and apps working together, we have all of these tools at our disposal. And this is what is really propelling Copilot Studio already to start to become existential to the evolution of thousands and thousands of customers around the world, doing things that they never could have done before. I want to highlight just a few. Grable is a global logistics company. They consider themselves a talent mobility company. They move people across the world, literally. They'll move house if you take a new job. But this is a company that has taken AI to heart in some of their most core operations. They've automated 75% of their accounts payable processing in finance using Copilot Studio and the broader Dynamics 365 stack. They've gone into service contract management and deployed teams of agents to work together, replacing things that were entirely manual before, based just on email and know-how, really starting to reinvent their core business, their core offering, not just to save a few hours or a little bit of money, but to be the most efficient, most effective, people logistics company on the planet, right? And this is even happening, not just in the private sector, it's happening in the public sector as well. The government of Flanders has worked with a partner to really overhaul how they do, a bunch of different processes. One of them that's so interesting is the way they manage public grant funding, and particularly the way they audit the use of those funds. This is an agency that provides up to 18 billion euro a year to more than 60,000 recipients. Keeping track of all that is really hard. And they have a high-risk list of about 6,000 of those recipients, and a team of 5 auditors responsible for making sure that those funds are used well among 6,000 high-risk associates. And in the past, they could only do it manually. They could only sample. It would take them 15 minutes at a time just to look at one invoice from one of those organizations. There was no way they could possibly cover the entire gamut of what they needed to support, right? But now with Copilot Studio, with agents and workflows, they've reduced that time of evaluation of an invoice from 15 minutes to 6 seconds, and they're now able to look at everything, not just individual samples, right? So they're, again, expanding out. What does it mean to be so much more effective and better at what a core business operation does? And again, this is really the spirit of Power Platform and of Copilot Studio. And I hope if you've got one takeaway from these demos, especially the last 2, is that that's not mutually exclusive. These things are designed to work together, right? And how do we take all of the goodness of Power Platform and frankly all of the efficiency of being able to deterministically create an app or an automation and then enhance it with AI? And then how do we go further than that into problem spaces and opportunities that we never would have taken on before? And use Copilot Studio to bring agents and workflows to solve those challenges. And this is something that's playing out in every organization. We're seeing both of these things grow. We're seeing that happen even inside of Microsoft. And I want to share a little bit of insider information in Microsoft. You think about just inside our own company, our own use of these tools. We have more than 800,000 Power Apps inside of Microsoft. It's a lot, right? And they do everything from individual simple productivity to major parts of our business runs on them. Can you guess how many Power Automate flows we have? It's more than that. It's more than 1 million Power Automate flows running inside of Microsoft. And both of these numbers continue to go up. They continue to grow and have been growing for years. Can you guess how many agents we have, though? More, well, not quite, but we have almost 600,000 agents as well. And here's the thing about the timescales here. We built all those apps and flows over the better part of the last decade. We built most of those agents in the last year, right? And so this innovation is not slowing down, it's expanding out the capability of what people can do. And it's really pushing the boundaries. Now, of course, that creates other pressures in the system, right? It creates ever more existential need for great governance, great management of the platform, great oversight and control. And that's certainly why we in Microsoft are extensive users of the managed Power Platform features, managed environments and environment routing and personal developer environments. But it's also why we have honed ourselves our own use of Agent 365 to manage what those agents are doing as well. And you'll hear a lot more about this tomorrow from Nirav and team in the day 2 keynote. But the core takeaway here is that governance is not just a tax to pay. It's not just a box to check. It's actually the thing that enables this type of scale to be impactful and to work inside of large enterprise organizations, right? If you start to think about these things together, and by the way, Agent 365, generally available for all of you to use and providing a ton of value in those places. But you zoom out and you put that in context, this is a learning loop that is just like the learning loop we'd have in an individual agent project, but at an organizational scale. Right? If you go think about everything we've talked about today, make every person more effective with tools like Copilot and Cowork. Take every existing process and make it better with Power Platform and AI, and start to tackle new challenges, new processes, invent new things that could never be built before. Do it all on a governable, securable, observable platform with tools like Power Platform and Agent 365. That enables continuous innovation. Right? We can continually improve the lives of every employee, the systems they work in, and the new systems that we have yet to imagine. Right? And that is the type of creativity that we all need. It's also the type of learning loop that we're engaging in here as a community. Right? As we learn from each other, we push each other's imagination of what is possible. We share skills of what works and what doesn't. And this is such a great opportunity over the next 3 days to do that here. Hundreds of sessions, thousands of opportunities to connect with each other. And once you've done that, you've gone home and taken a rest and tried it out. In a few more months, come get on a plane and join us in Las Vegas for the Power Platform conference there. And we'll do a whole nother round of all of this. And we'll have, in a few more months, just an incredible amount of innovation to share.